The Holy Gospel according to St. John, the 8th chapter.
Glory to you, O Lord.
Then Jesus said to the Jews who had believed in him, "If you continue in my word, you are truly my disciples, and you will know the truth, and the truth will make you free." They answered him, "We are descendants of Abraham, and have never been slaves to anyone. What do you mean by saying, 'You will be made free'?" Jesus answered them, "Very truly I tell you, everyone who commits sin is a slave to sin. The slave does not have a permanent place in the household. The Son has a place there forever. So if the Son makes you free, you will be free indeed." The Gospel of the Lord.
Praise to you, O Christ.
Grace be unto you and peace from God our Father and from our Lord Jesus Christ. Amen. It is a great pleasure and a great honor to be here with you today. What better place to celebrate the anniversary of the Lutheran Reformation than in a church which carries that Reformation's name and which is celebrating its own very wonderful anniversary this weekend. You have had many, many years here of faithful work, of hard work, of bad times, I imagine, but also of good times, glorious times. And your ministry has been expanded all across the world because of your generosity and because of the people who have come here and have traveled from here to carry your service, but also your message of Jesus' love, lots and lots of different places. It's just great to be here. It's an honor to be your bishop, too, and to bring you greetings from your brothers and sisters all across the Metropolitan Washington, D.C. Synod today. You don't necessarily make it easy on a person, however, I will say. Beginning Monday of last week, there was almost apocalyptic warnings about the Marine Corps Marathon, for heaven's sakes. I arrived on the curb outside your church at 7 o'clock this morning. I left my church in the middle of the night, it felt like, to make sure that I could get here. And I am just grateful that I found such a wonderful parking place. I was prepared to take a nap out there until other people began to arrive, and then someone else arrived right away, and we went off to Starbucks together. In any case, it is an amazing thing that we got here at all this morning, given those Marines. It's also a blessing, I can tell you, although you may not realize this, it's a blessing that the time change falls next weekend. Year after year in my ministry, the time change fell on Reformation Sunday. I preached many years before I was elected bishop at Hope Lutheran Church and Student Center across the street from the University of Maryland. And year after year after year, groggy undergraduates who would have known that it was Reformation Sunday but would have forgotten the time change would arrive in church early. And let me tell you, there's nothing worse than a grumpy college student to entertain for an hour before the church service actually begins. I'm glad that we didn't have to turn our clocks back on this particular weekend. Anyway, I suppose, having said that, there's a sense in which Reformation Sunday is always a little bit about turning the clock back, isn't it? I think that Reformation Sunday has been traditionally a time for Lutherans to celebrate something that can feel a little bit like a tribal festival, a return, at least in our hearts and minds, to a different age. For most of us, of course, it's not to Luther's own age, but it's a return to a time when Lutheran churches were more typically filled with people who had always been Lutheran. People who came to places like this, even as recently as 15 or 20 years ago, would mostly have been Lutherans, or they would have married into the Lutheran family. And so if people like us would have walked down the center aisle singing A Mighty Fortress, there would have been lots of people in the congregation who had in the back of their minds those words, the words to that hymn, in German, or in Swedish, or in Norwegian, or Danish, or something like that. We would have been more traditionally accustomed to being Lutherans together, and we would have been more traditionally accustomed really to being part of a Protestant establishment that doesn't quite exist anymore. Nowadays, in our synod, the Lutherans who are gathering today are worshiping in English, of course, and still some in German and some in Danish this morning. But mostly there are many others in Spanish and in Thai, several large congregations worshiping in Oromo, the traditional Lutheran language of Ethiopia. All over our synod today, there are people who are not Lutherans of long standing. And in fact, in lots of our congregations, people who are not Christians of long standing. It's not the same to celebrate Reformation Day now as it used to be even a little while ago. And I think, personally, that that's a good thing. I think the fact that we can no longer take our Lutheranism for granted because we live in a world where we can't take our Christianity for granted. I think this is a good thing for us, and it will make us better witnesses if we let it. So then what is Reformation Sunday? If it's not some kind of tribal festival, what is it? I say Reformation Sunday is the opportunity for us to remind each other that it is the death and the resurrection of Jesus in which God reveals the truth that's offered to us as freedom for every human being. Lutherans have never been people who thought that they were the only ones who knew this. But we have thought that we knew it in maybe particular ways, or with particular clarity. And we have held that freedom up as our contribution to preach about and to teach about in the Christian family. That has made us in some ways people with particular points of view when we met with other Christians. Sometimes our insistence on God's freedom has just actually made us eccentric. But the truth enfolded in the death and resurrection of Jesus Christ, we say, is the relentless and gentle and undefeated love of God for every human person. God's love is not separated from us, we see in Jesus. Not separated from any one of us. Because just like each one of us was born into this world, in God, in Jesus, that divine presence is born into this world too. And just the same way that every one of us will have to die, so in Jesus, God died to show us that that love is not limited by anything. The worst experience human beings can think of, God will share that with us. And because God shares our death, we are brave enough in our freedom to believe that we will share the new life of Jesus in our resurrection, for which death is the only prerequisite. If we just receive it, if we don't try to earn this love of God, if we just allow God to give it to us, if we will put aside the part of us that wants to earn every good thing, and if we'll take this as a gift, then God will allow the death and resurrection of Jesus to be attached to us in a way that never can be severed. God will not keep tally of our efforts. God doesn't keep score with us, Lutherans are proud to say. But we are freed up because God has claimed us to be people whose neighbors are our first interest. Set free by the death and resurrection of Jesus, we are the ones who know best, we say, how to show service that really changes people's lives.